check.
I don't want to slam the gavel when she's on the phone. That would be inappropriate.
But you can do it.
Might get her off the phone. All right, let's get this show on the road. Michael, I think we start with committee updates. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so from my left to right, Joe Dan, would you care to begin, sir?
Yeah, Freeman Park has had a meeting since the last town council workshop, and one of the shooting for is for the 6th, which I believe is next Thursday. And their main focus is still going to be working on either the pack it in, pack it out, or the carry it in, carry it out. Feel free to swing through if you're residents. Any feedback, comments, or concerns you have, we would love to hear from it. It currently is a pack it in, pack it out, as the website states. So a lot of people who keep asking why we're trying to push this initiative, it's already that initiative. I didn't make it to the Parks and Rec, but I'm going to take a quick look at the notes that Eric sent me. I know the bike rodeo is coming up. I believe it's the 8th. So feel free to swing out to that. It's going to be something that's going to be super awesome. They're trying to restart conversation for the volleyball courts, possibly over on Cape Fear, and possible designing park stuff for the lake area as soon as we know where we're going to go from there. And I believe that is all. And yep, that's it. Thank you.
Operations has been talking about for some time about irrigation meters. It's a state law that if you have an irrigation system, you should have an irrigation meter. But we know there's certain, at least from the number we know, they're registered. There's bound to be more irrigation systems out there than we have meters. So we're kind of trying to come up with a flyer to send out to the public. And one of the members is actually, Jason Wooten has come up with a calculator that will actually show how much more you would save and how long it would take to pay off. Because there is a certain initial cost to get it hooked up, but once you get it hooked up, there's quite a bit of savings on the water, especially since we changed the rates. Initially, it was not a savings. But we've changed that so that there actually is a benefit to having the irrigation meter. With the irrigation meter, we know that it makes it easier for us to monitor the water usage. If we do get into a drought, which we have not had lately, then we'd be able to monitor that, and we can actually shut those down to limit the watering of the yards. But it is a state law, and so the operations is working on that. We're also working along with the canal committee on working on the ordinances as far as the bulkheads. So, and next week for our meeting, we're going to actually go and tour the water treatment plant.
Yeah, definitely look forward to that. So I liaise with 3 committees or agencies, the TDA, Tourism Development Authority. Leanne and I tomorrow have a dinner meeting up in Wilmington. What the TDA is working with consultants right now is a strategic vision on how basically to holistically advertise, sell, and promote New Hanover County. You know, Wilmington, the city, its wonderful beaches. We've had some inputs to that. I think the deliverable is March of next year. While we're there tomorrow, we'll defend, probably with little resistance, a couple of ROT, room occupancy tax, reimbursable items that we've already paid for.
Like what?
Lifeguards is one. When we renovate the bathrooms, public bathrooms, I'm tipping off ahead, we will go back and secure ROT funding for that project. And just for the public's situational awareness, the fireworks are activities in the activities character or the category. Those are ROT reimbursements. So that's your town defending, really easy defense when you think about it. Tourist related, it comes back pretty quick. The Harbor Commission, we had our first meeting in 6 months. That was July 25th. Captain Dave Tilley stays on as the chair. Ed and I were at that. That was about a 2-hour meeting. Most of it was to determine optimal parking for whether it's a charter boat or a head boat or fishing, so on and so forth, where the winners are going to be parked. I think that'll be permanent. They did provide inputs to that. Some of that is already done and couldn't be amended. Michael, you know the Corps of Engineers regulations on how far your pylons can go out and your gangways. So that ship has already sailed, pun intended. And they provided some good recommendations, I think, on security and lighting. So we're pursuing some pricing on that. And finally, I'm not going to say much about the Canal Drive and Flooding Committee because they have a presentation tonight. I think those who aren't on the committee will find it, and those of us up here, very informative. That is in Gil's words yesterday, a squared away lot. Top shelf guys, and there's Dale, the chairman, right there. So that's what I got.
I am liaison to the Police Advisory Committee, and last month, instead of having a meeting, we did National Night Out. If you don't know what that is, that's when our police department, fire department, sheriff's department, different organizations around the county get together, and we educate children and give them things about bicycles and about walking and different things around town. Just give them a good education and get them used to being around police officers and knowing they're somebody they can confide in and trust. So we had that in August. We have Coffee with a Cop on, Coffee with a Cop is September 18th at the Bagel Master. So, and that's at 8 o'clock. So you guys come out and ask your police officer questions. That's something we're going to be doing once a quarter from here out. So the next one is September 18th. I have the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and it's a very new committee, so we're just getting started on some of those things. We are working on a map that would go tell the different routes we would prefer you to take around town for walking and biking. We're looking at a possible interactive app where you would log into Carolina Beach or Pleasure Island, and it would tell you what street you're on and where you should go. Sorry, Michael, I hadn't told you this yet, but that's what my committee's working on. And we're hoping to have that where you can just log in and look and see where you're at and where you should go. We're working with Curry Beach on that to see where they would like us to direct people if they go to Curry Beach. Next month, we're going to have a DOT representative at our meeting, so we're hoping to ask him some questions about the crosswalks, which we're getting a lot of questions about around town. The crosswalks and the light that our traffic study has recommended we get. So we're going to hopefully he'll give us some information on what we can do and what the procedure is, and maybe we'll make a friend with DOT next month. Joe updated you on TDA. We have that tomorrow. And Tom and I, this is not a committee, but Tom and I attended last Saturday an affordable housing conference at the St. Paul's United Methodist Church. Tom and I were both there, and the Help Center was there. A couple of realtors were there. Randy Evans was there, different people around town. And what we're talking about is how can we help the Help Center with people maybe in town that need help with jobs or housing or making it more affordable, and how can we get them back in the workforce and looking at it a different way than just saying we don't know what to do with you. So, and Sean Blackwater at the church, the pastor there, headed that up, and I think that's going to be a great program. We're meeting again in a couple of months, and hopefully we can get some traction on how to help some of our citizens here in Carolina Beach. So, that's all I got.
The MPO, the Wilmington Metropolitan Planning Organization, met last month. Jerry is in the process of potentially putting together additional funding requests if we go that direction for the Island Greenway, if we need additional dollars. There is a reluctance from the MPO to hand out any more grant dollars for those bike and trails because they've just taken so long. And most of the MPO expendable dollars have been absorbed by the mass transit, wave transit headquarters downtown. And Leanne is kind enough to attend tomorrow's meeting for me and cover that since I won't be there. She's agreed to do that. I appreciate it. Ports and Waterway meets once a month, and that reviews all of the sand funding for the beach nourishment. I believe we did go out to bid within the last few days, and we should be receiving bids back for the beach nourishment, which is now called Storm Damage Mitigation Plan. It's changed its name 5 times in 6 years. It's basically the sand on the beach, and they should be starting that sometime late this fall. Realistically, I would expect it right at close to the end of the year, and it's a 4-month project. We should have 750,000 cubic yards of sand in the historic template and also Curie Beach will be getting theirs. That is funded 100% with federal, state, and ROT dollars. So at this point, we have not had to make a contribution out of the general fund, so that's good. We are working on the 15-year permit extension. We've been working on that permit extension for 4 years, but we're getting closer every year. We did get good news in that if and when the BRER comes back, which shows that putting storm damage reduction projects, we get a 2-to-1 or better cost-benefit ratio, and we get extended, we will get a full 15 years. Originally, when they approved the 15-year extension, it was going to be inclusive of all the time it took to get the permit renewed. They have come to understand with this year's WARDA Act, the Water Resource Development Act through Congress, that we would have a full 15 years if our BRER demonstrates that we have a good cost-benefit ratio. So we have those going on, and the other committee that I help with is the Ryder Lewis Park, and you've seen the emails going about the naming of the park, and that should be coming forward with Eric Jelinski, and I think Jerry and staff have been working Michael's direction to come up with some funding on phase 1, so we're hoping that that'll kick off here pretty soon.
Yeah.
And that's all I have.
Any questions from the staff? Okay. I do believe that the Harper Streetscape presentation is next. Michael?
Yes, sir. I'd like to introduce Jonathan Guy, who's with Kimley Horn. Jonathan's been here before, talked to us on many development projects in the area, dealing with transportation, and we hired him to help us with the Harper Avenue streetscape. He initially finished up at, you can go over to that one, that would be fine. We finished up the Lake Park Boulevard study, and actually Jonathan and I had a very good meeting with the MPO and DOT today regarding that, so positive movement there. So Jonathan, you want to explain what we've been doing on Harper Avenue?
Absolutely. Mayor, members of council, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to be back in front of you. Wanted to give you an update on what we've been doing. We've been in town, I want to say we've been in town every week, starting at the end of July, working on this project either through a design workshop or through just meetings in the field working with some property owners as well as town staff. So I'm going to walk you through just really the corridor, give you a highlight. If you weren't able to come to our design workshop, some of this information you may have seen. You did come. If you haven't, it's great information relative to the corridor itself, and really kind of gives you a sense of what we heard and the direction that we're going. We've updated the concept based on our meeting on the 15th, as well as some conversations we had in the field last week. So this is current information for those of you who are here tonight that were there on the 15th. But the overall corridor, you can see up on screen, it's approximately 1 mile in length. There's a lot of rich history associated with this corridor. A lot of it we learned through the design workshop. Those are always valuable for that. Understanding the context, understanding the impact to the residents, understanding what this corridor used to be and how it and what it means to the community is important. And so you'll notice as we go through the street design concept, we've tried to encapsulate a lot of that in this. But again, it's 1 mile in length. We've got a right-of-way that varies between 90 and 100 feet. It's posted 35 miles per hour, although I'll add a caveat to that. While it is posted, a lot of people, especially on the western side of the corridor towards Dow Road, really don't drive 35 miles per hour. Those speeds get up pretty high. Sidewalks are about a third of the corridor, really more towards Lake Park, and we carry about 1,522 vehicles per day. To give you a perspective, Lake Park carries about 24,000 vehicles per day. So this corridor, while it has some high speeds through there, it's not carrying a whole lot of volume. So a lot of the recommendations we're going to show you are going to be more based in the pedestrian, bicycle, and aesthetic realm rather than the throughput of traffic. The capacity on a typical road like that is 15,000 vehicles per day, so you're 1/10 of that. So anything out here is not necessarily designated because of capacity reasons. There are some issues in the corridor. As we were here, we got to see Lake Good Hops. It was out there a couple days for us. There's a couple feet of water that are standing there. We actually had a very good meeting with DOT about this issue. It's been reported to the maintenance engineer. With DOT, they're looking at it. I think when we showed them some photographs of not only the super elevation, which you can see over here, how the road slopes into this, the depth of the water, and some of the different angles that we had, DOT quickly started to realize, I think we've got a problem here. We need to work with the town, and it's something that, we'll probably have a little bit to contribute to this relative to the flooding out there. Fortunately, if there is a bright side to this, there is a depression there, so we are able to capture this water. Otherwise, given the overall fall of the property through here, I'm afraid that the building would be inundated with water if we didn't have that depression there. And there's other locations too along the corridor. But our process, where we've been, we've had day one, which was on the 31st, day two, which was August 1st. Again, it was 2 days. We were here. We stopped by. We had a lot of conversations, not only with policy or with property owners, policymakers, the Wilmington MPO, town staff, residents, business owners. We did a lot of data collection. We spent a lot of time here. And then we had a public meeting, not only tonight, but also on the 15th to go through a lot of this information. So there's been a tremendous amount of discussion relative to this. So let me share just a little bit about what we heard. If you were here, we had 21 people who came the first night. We did a really cool thing. We did keypad polling. You got this little device you didn't get to take home, but you got to push a bunch of numbers on it. And you got to see a lot of different information relative to that. It provided us some wonderful insight on what we needed to know about the corridor and what folks were looking for. So we had a couple of different vision statements that were developed out of that. Everyone we talked to said Harper Avenue is a unique street. And if you look at a map, as we showed earlier, it is. It cuts across the grain. It comes across at a sweeping angle, which follows the corridor of the railroad track. But it strikes attention as you look at that corridor. It's completely different. Somebody made a comment today as I was talking to them at the MPO. It's amazing. You got 100 feet of right-of-way here, but it's not where you need the right-of-way. You actually need the right-of-way in other places. So you're blessed with that ability to do a lot with a corridor. And it is a unique corridor in the sense of what it connects. It's really the only connection that you have that you can make either walking or from a bicycle that's going to connect the state park where a lot of people stay when they come visit, in your boardwalk. And most communities don't have the ability to create a greenway that connects those elements. And so it's a very cool street from that. It is in definite need of some improvement and a unifying character, and a lot of folks in the community have expressed that. And there is strong support for this remaining a residential corridor, even though there's some commercial that's up towards Lake Park. The majority of it is single-family residential. Will it change? That's for the future to tell us. And based on the traffic numbers, nobody is using this. It's sort of like the secret passage, if you will. 1,500 people per day using that is a very low number. Parking. Parking was a big issue for folks in the corridor. We need to maintain it. You can see that you've got a combination of hotels and residential units that are rental units. You've got businesses in the photo up there. You can really see what's going on, that there is a lot of folks, especially in that 200 block. It begins to transition the further north you go or further west you go, but it does have a parking impact. And people are parking out there today on the grass. We did make a recommendation that you need to look at a parking study overall. We heard a lot of people say, how many parking spaces do you need? Not really sure. How much does the town need? We don't know. There needs to be a parking study, and I know that you've looked in that a little bit, but a town-wide parking study would be key to help answer some of those questions as we begin moving forward. Stormwater, that's a no-brainer, especially up at Dow Road, and as you start to come back down, we're starting to see a lot of that. We had a very good discussion last Thursday afternoon with town staff talking about improvements for Phase C improvements, Phase A and Phase B, how those are tying into this, how we will connect to that to help mitigate. Where do we see issues? Again, we walk the corridor looking for places where we might need to connect to existing stormwater or amplify that or supplement that. So we're making recommendations moving forward with that. And it is important to note that the existing median, as beautiful as it is, or as ugly as it is, depending on your perception, doesn't really do anything for stormwater. Water does not go up a hill and over a curve to get in there. So there's not a benefit for that from a stormwater perspective as we look at it in its current state today. we heard a lot about green infrastructure, whether it's on the side or whether it's in the median. Everyone really likes green in this, and it's a community-wide endeavor, if you will, but it's particularly for this street. Being the only street that I am aware of that actually has a median on the island, it's a unique street. We go back to the design elements, we've talked about that. We've had conversations, I've had conversations as recently as today, talking about the median. Should we keep it? Should we not? Should the median move to the side? Should it stay in the middle? The concept we've come up with retains it at this point, but in a smaller section, lengthwise for the overall corridor and widthwise. And so we really feel like there's some value to that, but it does help to improve that aesthetics of the corridor, or as a green street as we look at not only the green of the avenue, but also the greening of folks walking and bicycling through here. And bicycle and pedestrian, again, this is really the driving factor through here. I would say, I can't say with 100% certainty, but I would say the majority of folks indicated that they are in favor of a multi-use path connecting the corridor from the park down to the boardwalk. Sidewalks, we heard a lot of things about folks saying, well, I know there's an existing sidewalk out there today in the 200 and the 300 block, but I'm not really sure if I walk over there because it looks like someone else's yard. There's some lights over there. It's really close because it's a wide corridor. See a lot of people walking down the middle of the street because the lights are out there. So those are some things that we need to address as we go through this design and we move this into the overall design. But there is support to mix that, and we need to look at some safety improvements up at Lake Park and Dow Road, as well as Lake Park and Harbor Avenue. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I show you the concept, what I'm talking about. Just to give you a little bit of sense here, this is how we divided this up, the corridor context. You got A, which is really the 200, 300 block, which really has the majority of the median. As we looked at this, we saw that Lumberton at 4th really made sense to really start transitioning that. You're seeing a change in the housing stock style, shape, lot width, configuration, its proximity to the road, and then that creates section B, which goes all the way up to Dow Road. And so you'll see that as our design comes up on screen. You'll see how we kind of brought that into play, but we felt like that was the part of the corridor where there was two unique characteristics and two unique context areas, if you will. So this is the overall concept. This is updated. I'm going to zoom in on a couple blocks just to show you what I'm talking about. So the first one is the Lake Park to 4th Street. And if you'll look up here, one of the things that we heard is that folks coming from the boardwalk, if you will, as they're coming out here, you'll notice how the configuration of the lanes are today. You've got a dedicated right turn lane, and you've got a dedicated through left. That's not a typical configuration, and with this readjustment of the street section, one of the things we've done is we narrowed this up a little bit. We've narrowed the lanes down. The current lanes are 15 feet. We've narrowed those down to about 11 feet. The median width is 19 feet today, and we've narrowed that down to about 9 to 10 feet. We're doing that so that we can bring the overall street elements in, slow traffic down. Hopefully, we'd like to repost the speed limit on this section of street to 25 miles per hour. But also, with that, design influences speed. If I kept the 15-foot travel lanes out there, I can post this at 5 miles per hour or 25 miles per hour. I'm still going to drive 45 miles per hour. It feels wide. So we've done that. But as we did that, you'll notice that we've changed the language as we come across here. Now it's a through right and a dedicated left where the median used to come all the way up through here. We've done that so that we can shadow this on the opposite side. If we don't change this, what's going to happen is that through left is now pointing at the through movement coming out. We've had a conversation with DOT already about this. They agree that that needs to be resolved. There's not a heavy enough volume coming in this right to keep it as an overlap. From what our conversations led us to believe was that that had to do with some evacuations. When you're doing emergency evacuations, and we've done plans for entire states with the evacuation plans, existing traffic control does not matter at that point. You're going to change those plans as you're trying to evacuate, so there's no need to keep something in place at this point for everyday operations when you can adjust that simply in the field if you need to. You'll notice that we actually walked the entire corridor last week with Ed. We looked at each home that had the the ability to have a 9x18 pad, where we could do a 9x18 pad, which is your town standard for a parking space off the right-of-way. We have provided them the driveway pad to provide that. In other locations, we've tried to balance the green with additional parking spaces for those residents who couldn't have a parking space.
Explain it,
Right.
explain it to me one more time.
Okay, so you have a town policy that says if you can have a 9x18 pad off right of way, so on your property, then we will give you an apron, a driveway apron, from the public street over to the right of way.
And so that's demonstrated on this map.
You can see here, there's a location there, there's one,
Is between the two green spaces, it's the white space
It's a
right
little
there?
white space,
Okay.
looks like a driveway.
And that's a pad that we give them an apron to their,
An apron to get to their property and park on their property.
If you remember our work in Phase B and in Phase A, where we developed a standard and said, okay, if you have the ability to park a car on your property, that a space on your property that is 9x18, we will provide you with a driveway apron to encourage you to get off the street and park on the property. So that's what we did in Phase B. This continues that process.
theoretically, would they be able to then tandem park in that one on the apron? Is that,
It would be they have to have the minimum of a single space. They can't put one
on their
behind
lot?
the other
They have to
on
have-
their lot.
Right, they have to have one space on their lot, but if we create an apron between those two green bars, theoretically, they could do tandem parking, is that?
They could, as long as they weren't impeding the
Sidewalk.
sidewalk.
Okay. I know that's been a concern that was
Right.
broached to me from a variety of people up and down there that just said, hey, not many households have one car when there's multiple people working.
Well, and they
And-
also have visitors.
And one of the other things that we discussed, and I'll just chime in here on this with Jonathan, is we currently have a residential parking program. Most of those houses are 1950s stock houses that had no parking on the lot when they were built. I think we have a half a dozen of those locations. We give them anywhere between 1 and 2 parking spaces on street to allow them to park, and we dedicate that as residential parking only. You can see that on Cape Fear, where we've done that a couple of times with some of the small shotgun shacks that are there. We would most likely end up doing the same thing with the houses that are in this first 3 blocks anyways, where they are so close to the street.
From Lake to Third and Third back to Fourth.
Yeah.
When you look at this overlay map and you're at 100-foot right-of-way, do we have some encroachments into the right-of-way with structures?
No,
Are we right up on the line on some of them?
no, we're actually trying to move the impact in.
I see that,
8
but I
foot
mean,
right-of-way line.
one of the surprises that we've shown people in the past is that we're actually zero lot line construction on a build two on some of these older properties. The
We
new
haven't-
ice cream place on the corner, I mean, is he right on the?
We haven't got that far into it to go and get down to surveying each one of the obstructions that are there.
Right. In those locations, we try to work around that as best we can.
One other final, at this point, the angled parking that you've got here in the first block or so, how deep, what's the depth of those spaces? 18 feet, 20 feet?
It's approximately 18 feet.
I know the feedback that we've gotten is our change on Cape Fear has made it very crowded. And when you have any normal size or larger size vehicle getting in and out of those parking spaces on Cape Fear, it's very dangerous right there at Lake and Cape Fear. I know you guys have all heard those comments, right? When people park a big truck
It
right
is.
there.
And
Just want to make sure we don't repeat that same constriction.
a great point, and you'll notice if you look at the screen, we pulled the parking back. That was one of the things that came out of our public meeting was, over at Cape Fear and Lake, it's really close. You could either come off of Lake and a car is backing out, and sometimes it's backing out into Lake. So we have pulled that forward, or pulled the parking back from the Lake, which is over here, Lake Park, so that you don't have that interference with the intersection. You don't have the interference with the pedestrian either. Basically, as you're coming off of Lake Park and you turn to go on Harper, you turn, you've gone through the maneuver, and you're driving straight before you would interact with another vehicle. That helps with sight distance at the signal. It helps with pedestrians crossing. It helps with overall safety of, vehicles moving in and out of that area.
The fact that we also have a 100-foot right-of-way in that area and we're narrowing up the island should give us enough where we could expand the parking areas to the point where the vehicles that are parked there don't lap over into the travel lane like they do on Cape Fear. We've seen that in several occasions where somebody pulls in a big truck and it's sticking way out into the street. You could narrow up the median a little bit more and play with those numbers to try
In
and
this
make sure that
particular
doesn't.
drawing, you've taken away the median at the intersection. You know, it says
Absolutely.
right in front of Tucker's building. I mean, that's one thing that Tommy's always said is that median's in pretty rough shape.
Yes.
Steve, what do you mean by your second question there in regards on that line that you're addressing with the ice cream shop? Can you?
Well, when you
Expand
look
on
at that green box that comes right up on it, it just, and that curve, you know, being somewhat familiar with that intersection, his building's right up on that.
Yep.
So I'd be interested to see when this gets to scale.
How close
and
it gets to it?
surveyed.
So
He's
you're
got
still maintaining a sidewalk in there. So the green doesn't go all the way up, and there's an additional sidewalk area that's kind of pulled out to the concrete. So this is going to change. So it gives an overall representation of the area. So you could do cafe seating out there. You could do sidewalk. You could just keep it open as it is. It helps that corner out because this is somewhat of a blind corner. As you come out here, it's very tight between the front door and where you're going to try to cross the crosswalk. So in the detailed design here, what we've actually done, this crosswalk is actually pulled over a little bit more than where it is currently today. So kind of pull that back a little bit more so that you're not all standing on the same corner over here. You've got more room for that maneuverability. We've shortened that too. It's not running the longer lane than it was currently today. So we've reduced some time at risk. And we have a little bit more unique design, I think, that we've passed along that we're going to be implementing on some of these approaches too for the overall crosswalk, the look and feel. Some of the other elements, just to give a nod back to the railroad, you'll notice there's some stamped paving. You can see that we put some laid out areas through there. It's either a stamped concrete or a stamped asphalt, but it really kind of brings the element, gives you that illusion of, you know, the former railroad tracks, which is why we sort of scaled this down. To Michael's point, if we need to increase the width or if there's a desire to remove the median overall, you know, you're picking up an additional 10 feet with that, so you can change the look and feel of that. The median kind of gives it a unique character. I like it personally, but I understand there may be a preference to kind of play around with that a little bit. We have provided a little bit additional parking over here. One of the conversations we've had in the sub process was with the church here, St. Paul, and what they indicated is that this location right here is Florence transition and then they're taking that street out. And that's a really convoluted little triangular intersection here. You've got this connection over here. You really don't need that section of Florence Street. Remove that, and in turn, what the task is going to is that, you know, when you have vehicles that will line up right through here, so you can get through here. We brought back some additional parking through here. One of the church is really kind of the linchpin of where we see two additional parking, you know, on the street. With that moving, you get on
John, before you do have a question for you,
Yeah.
the terracotta color there on the bottom,
Mhm.
is that the possibility of a multi-use path that you?
Multi-use path.
Okay.
It's a 10-foot multi-use path.
Thank you.
So now looking at 4th Street up to 6th Street, you'll notice that we, at 4th Street, with Lawrence Palace, we have started to transition away. The median starts to get a little bit smaller, and we've pulled that section in through there. This is the transition point. You're starting to see a change. You'll notice that at this point you see where homes are getting to be spread out a little bit more. Not to say there's not some pockets where you've got some close, tight neighborhoods or residents through there, but we're really starting to move this a little bit more, change the section, and bring that overall section in further at that point. So we've got a much smaller cross section that's out there. One of the comments was earlier, or last week, was to continue the sidewalk up a little bit further, all the way up to 6th Street, along this section through here. So it's an extension of where it currently stops in front of the church. We're carrying that on further up as part of this, and you'll see some crosswalk locations. We've added those in, of course, the driveways. This squiggly line you can kind of see right here, this is the oriented you, this is where the current Masonic Lodge is. But this squiggly line that kind of runs across right here, that's where the current sidewalk is. So that kind of gives you a perspective of how this section is starting to come in and get smaller through there. So the impacts, the property owners through here are starting to diminish as we move forward. We're taking that right of way further in, so that there's no further impact. And then as we kind of take a more global look, you can see this is the rest of the corridor. It's a very similar, typical section. You can see the overall multi-use path separated by a planning strip, and then of course a two-lane section. Much smaller lanes than what's out there currently today. The impact is going to be very negligible. These folks right through here that come in where the sidewalk extension is, there's going to be an encroachment there, not inside or beyond the right of way, but there's going to be a sidewalk in front of your house where there's currently not one today. So there will be a little bit right through there, through that section. But overall, that sidewalk gets you all the way up to 7th Street at that point. We had several questions about why we chose the south side. A lot of that has to do with where the current crossing of the Greenway is up at Dow Road, the right of way, and where it takes you down through there. Crossing that over or moving that or changing that becomes more expensive. Plus the angle at which Harper comes into Dow Road makes it a little more unique and makes it more difficult to switch that if we were going to switch it. So we continued with that section. Plus it impacts, if you do an overall, and folks may not see that, it impacts actually to your property. Because you've got a large swath through here and some other locations where per home you don't have as many impacts. So that's a very quick overview of where we are today and the concept design. I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have or any comments or anything like that at this time.
The only other comment I had in question was golf cart parking. We talked a lot about, maybe maximizing that down towards Lake Park. Personally, I'm not sure with the golf carts if they wouldn't prefer, they're going to want to try and park closer in, but if we just don't seem to have a lot of golf carts. So someone had mentioned to me, could we take one whole section and make 10 or 12 golf cart spots? Just at some point, we seem to be increasing the number of golf carts on our roads.
One of the difficulties, if you look at that Lake Park to 4th Street section there, is the two commercial areas right down there next to Lake Park take up the space that would be prime for golf carts, right? They have to have their businesses have full-size parking spaces. The farther out you get more in front of people's houses. So we can see what we can do. Keep in mind that we do have the golf cart parking passes, so you can park in any parking space if you have a golf cart parking pass. So it doesn't have to be a full size or a small size.
Right, and I think
Space.
what Steve was trying to get at, and we had discussed this, is how can we park more, how can we park more golf carts and maximize those spaces? Yeah, 2 in a space or whatever. Michael, I have a question. I see this parking that's on here. Have you looked at how many homes you'd have to designate residential parking places to? How many spaces will that take?
We've talked to most of the property owners throughout there. I think it was about 6 houses that we thought would need to have the residential parking pass. And right now, the pass is anywhere between 1 and 2 parking spots. So it would be set up so it would be the parking spaces right in front of their house.
I got you. And so we are gaining parking.
Yes,
with this.
very.
Do you know how many spaces?
Let me say this: we're gaining designated parking spaces because all of this parking area right now, people park on the grass, so they're not designated parking spaces. I don't think that we have a full count yet off of this schematic.
I would suggest, along with
It's
what
on the-
Steve said, and I understand what you're talking about, the Caroline Beach Inn and the ice cream shop, even though they are in CBD and not required to have parking, I can see why, we would want to do that. But maybe a little further down, if we could turn 10 spaces into 20 golf cart spaces,
Right,
that
right.
would be great. And
We can
I'd like
definitely
you to
look
look
at
at
that.
that.
Okay.
Just one, Jonathan. It's kind of hard to tell based on the scale, although I do have some sense of encroachment. How close would you estimate the multi-use path get to, or if you walked it, did you have some sense at how close that multi-use path would get to some of the homes on the south side of it?
In most locations through here, if you're looking at your sidewalk, it's gonna move about a foot towards the road from where the back sidewalk is.
Right.
So it's gonna
Currently.
move away from the home.
And
So currently, there's a sidewalk there that is
From
right
where
on
it
the
is today
property
is what
line.
I'm getting at.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm just looking for a netter of minus, gain retraction. Okay.
Some locations, there's a foot of right of way behind the sidewalk. Some locations, there's not. So again, we're going through all the deed research to determine that, but on average, the general statement there, it's gonna move about a foot from where the back of the current sidewalk is towards the street.
Towards the street.
Right, so you're gonna gain a little bit of space there. I know it's very sensitive. There's some really beautiful homes through here.
Yeah.
There's some really nice little walls that have been created, so we're trying to address that. We're trying to move it in locations where we can away from those. The last thing we wanna do is encroach on that or have someone step off their
Yep.
sidewalk and,
Yeah.
or front stoop right into the side path. That's not a good situation.
You got my question, thank you.
one of the things I'd be interested in, obviously, where you've got the parking, you need the sidewalk so they're not walking on the grass and that kind of stuff. But as we get closer to Dow Road, I'd be interested in maybe not having the sidewalk on the north side, to save some money. Cause it's only got 1,522 houses, cars per day.
Sure.
Certainly they can get over to the multi-use path and still be able to have plenty of, movement on that. So I'd be really interested in the cost estimates.
As we get into more of a finalized design, we're starting to do quantity. That's something we can get back to you guys to say, is this worth the additional cost associated with that? It's pretty easy to take that out. I understand the perspective though of,
Well, and it's,
use.
you're talking about it does encroach on those that
It does.
doesn't have one now, and I don't know why we have to add more concrete if we don't need it.
Yep.
So,
Some of
and
it
this road would be prime for that because of the low traffic.
and I totally agree with that. And some of it had to do with where some of the infrastructure was coming up, from Phase C improvements. Where
Right.
there is some sidewalks, they're kind of coming up and they're kind of stopping, and they kind of lead you to a point of nowhere. And
Yeah.
so what we would need to do in that location, or those locations, is look at that, see how we could connect across to make sure they can get over to the side path so that they're not walking in the street as they are today.
Right.
So as long as we address that, I think we can
Yeah, but
certainly.
your parking goes to what block? And then,
We stop,
But the
about
first-
midway, I can back up, you can see, this is really it right here.
Yeah.
About halfway through Fourth Street.
yeah, the 4th Street does, so beyond that, we wouldn't necessarily need that northern, sidewalk.
So, and currently it does go all the way up here today.
Right.
We've got sidewalk up
But
to,
you're gonna tear it out anyway.
we gotta improve that.
Don't
It's
have
4
to,
feet.
yeah, so we're gonna tear it out, we don't necessarily have to put it back.
Plant native plants.
Yeah,
Michael, I
just
have a
save money.
question. I know now that people are parking basically in the grass, and nobody's gonna pull up in their yard and park and go to the boardwalk. But when we put parking places there, are you having, complaints on the other streets where you have residential signage? Are people, the general public, parking in those places or not?
We do get some sporadic, mostly on the nights where we have fireworks, but it's not quite as extensive the rest of the time. So I'd say we've had maybe 3 or 4 over the entire season where, hey, I came home, someone's parking in this parking spot, and at that point we go and send out parking enforcement officers. Typically on those 3 or 4 that we've had, the cars.
So not many.
No, the car's been moved before we even get there to
And
go.
would the
and put
homeowner
sign.
be able to call to have someone towed from their spot?
Yes, and basically the homeowner can't request a tow company come in and tow because it's our property.
Okay.
But they call us, and yes, if we have to tow, then that's what we do.
So what's next? Now that we've seen this, what comes to council next?
Absolutely. Next steps is to sit down with Ed to finalize the design and move forward with the construction, plans, that is. We are still waiting on the last section of survey, which is really kind of set up. We're supposed to get that in about 2 weeks. So the design really can't move forward till we have that. We can start looking at the other end and focusing on some of the details down there. This discussion really is about just the concept something that you're agreeable to? Is this, are we headed in the right direction, or are there major elements that we need to come back and reassess?
I'd have to agree with Steve in regards to the golf carts, and that's because the majority of residents I speak to say they understand they have a parking sticker, but they'd prefer to park somewhere that would allow our visitors to have a parking spot. So if we were able to do something to construct a designated zone for golf carts, and maybe even bike parking up there, the little metal things, because I think we only have like 3 of those in town.
There's some very good space up here for bicycle parking. You got a lot of green space up there. It's not a location I really want to put a whole lot of parking because you're getting into the Lake Park intersection. Bicycle parking, certainly put some stands up there. We could even do a covered shelter if you needed to. You've got a lot of options associated with the hardscaping, if you will, for bicycle trails. Slow electric vehicles, that's one of those trade-offs. If that's something the town thinks we need to look at, we can certainly address that, and try to create some parking spaces if that's something you feel like we need to address.
I guess my overall comments and thoughts are, I like the plan. I really like keeping the median. I understand why we have to do away with it there at the intersection, but it is really kind of a unique feature to the community to have that divided median. It's just a really neat feel. You know, it gives us part of that small town feel. So personally, I'm really glad to see that stay. I'm all for a 10-foot multi-use path. I understand why it's at 10 feet. The MPO has educated me on that, but I can tell you the feedback we got from a lot of people in the community was 10 feet was a lot wider than we needed. I'm just putting that out there. So we're going to have some education on why we're doing another 10-foot multi-use path. And I would like at some point to get some tape measures and some stakes out there on those first block and a half or so and show where the right-of-way is, and actually maybe put out some cones and look at parking. We did that on Cape Fear when we were talking about doing parking in the median, and we brought the fire truck down, we parked trucks on both sides, and when we got there we looked and said there's just not room for center parking in the median, and we still ended up with those parking spaces that are problematic. So I think a visual, for me, a visual demonstration on the ground with equipment, seeing exactly how that GMC truck can sit in that parking space and allow someone to back out, and just so that it's functional. I would just want to make sure on the ground it's functional.
And, you know, to your comment, I heard all the same things when we started the multi-use path on Cape Fear, but I think now that it's there and people are using it, I don't hear that so much. I think people like it and they're using it, but I don't know, that was my question to Michael, is this going to council for public discussion next month?
We weren't planning on having any specific public discussion or public hearing on whether or not this is the concept that you're interested in. This is the concept that was developed with the public input through the public process. That was the intent. But we can, if you'd like, try and do something very similar to this at the September council meeting and do a public hearing on it.
I'd be interested if anybody from the public that lives on that street would like to make any comments or have anything to say or to add, and they live on that street for sure. I'd love to hear that. And are we funded for this project?
The way that this project's being funded is through the Phase C project. Now, that doesn't include things like stormwater and the streetscape aspect, so that's going to be in addition to that project that we would have to fund.
And what kind of time frame are we looking at?
I believe the Phase C is looking to go out somewhere in the spring.
So, Michael, just to back up on that, make sure we're clear on what you said, that does not include the streetscape.
The stormwater and the streetscape.
None of this that we're looking, all these colored drawings would not be in that bond that we've already approved.
That's correct.
It would be above and beyond what
That
we
would
already have.
be above and beyond.
We'd have to find that money.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But then 2 months ago, didn't we transfer on what has $500,000 from Phase A to Phase B that was left over?
There are funds that are still available in the revenue bonds. Yes.
We're
And
just
currently,
going to have
they're
to
kind
address
of
it. I'm just wanted to make sure we all understood that it's
cost.
not something that we funded yet. There are funds available.
Well, and that's why I think it's important to look at maybe not having all the sidewalks. I think on Cape Fear, seeing the 10-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot, sidewalk on the other side, that was the part that was hard to contend with, and certainly that was a concern on Charlotte and some of the other things. And Part B. So, yeah, we don't have the funding for that. We can cut some things. That would save quite a bit of money, I would believe.
Well, as far as the public hearing, I'd like to see us get some kind of write-up or have Kimley Horn work with the paper to get something out so that people that aren't either online or paying attention to this get a chance to see this. And whether it's September or October, we need to bring it back, and I think the public should absolutely be able to come in and say
Door flyer.
all the reasons why they like it or don't, just so.
I mean, a lot of them came in, but it's always good to have more opportunities. There's other people that haven't. I
But
know
if
that
we're gonna
people that
finalize and
don't
vote on
agree.
something, I think we
Right,
should
I
probably
agree.
let them know.
And Michael, have you had citizens contact you with maybe individual specific problems, and have you addressed those?
Yes, we have. Matter of fact, I met with the Carolina Beach Inn this week already, specifically on this. I know that Ed has, and I think a few other folks have too. So, yes, we've gone out and actually spoke with the folks that had concerns. And they're all legitimate things that we just have to factor into the planning and the design.
Yeah, I think the public meetings were good. It's the people who live on that street. This is what they're going to live with for years to come, and so they need the input. And I'm certainly welcome everybody coming back again.
Given that there's only a couple of weeks before our September council meeting, it may end up being that we do this at the October
Well, he's
and
got
try
some
and do
stuff he's
quite a
gotta
bit
fix,
of
too.
advertising to get people interested in coming for that public hearing.
And we gotta have the survey done by then,
It's defensible.
Yes, yes.
so that would be sensible. Okay. Any other questions, comments,
No.
guys?
John, good job. Thanks.
Just for
Thanks,
the
John.
public that's here, and I know a lot of you are here for this, things change and evolve, as you probably heard about the Greenway and different things we're doing. As we get into it and things change and we get different ideas and input from the public, we're flexible. So we need to see what you guys need and what you want, and we want to hear from you. So I know you're here about that.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Thanks. And now we transition to, I think we got the Canal Drive Flood Committee with a presentation, Mike?
That is correct. And we have
Dale,
Dale. I think you're coming up.
our illustrious chairman.
And then Adam from Aptium. Aptum. I can't ever get that right. Yep, just right up there.
Thank you for coming in, guys.
I want to thank the council for allowing us to come up here and present this evening. Before we get started, we've got a couple of other committee members here that I'd like to introduce. It's Steve Taylor, who's our vice chairman, and Jerry Hall over here, who's our member at large, who has, I think you've been here, what, 26 years? 26 years in the community, so we've got a lot of experience with the flooding on Canal Drive. What we'd like to do this evening is we've broken our presentation down into three specific elements. One is our initial principal initiating task for what we're going to be asking you for the okay to proceed with. These are recommendations we're making tonight. We'll go over in detail why we're here making these recommendations, and then Adam is going to present the technical and financial elements behind it. And then thirdly, because we've been meeting now since May, so we're going to have our sixth meeting coming up here in September. I want to kind of give you an idea of what the meeting is shaping up for and what you can expect for work product coming from us in the future. So, the principal initiating task when we first started to look at the ordinance in particular and the improvements out here was the design elevation for any future improvements that come in here. The elevation that's being used right now is 4.7 feet MSL. That is an empirical determination. The town marina is using that particular elevation. That elevation right now, that's the elevation that has not been exceeded by normal weather conditions or tidal conditions over an extended period of time. However, the committee felt that because this is going to be an element built in a future in ordinance, that we needed to have a number for that that was identically defendable. That number is going to be generated by a combination of two things or three things. One, the sea level rise by tide over the last 70 years has been approximately 1 foot. That's in this area. The projection for that is that it's going to be about the same on the tidal elevation for the next 70 years, plus an unknown factor for whatever was associated with global warming. So we need to, or would like to make recommendations for that elevation and incorporate all of those elements in there. The tidal monitoring, and this is this information we're getting from North Carolina Sea Grant with Spencer Rogers, who I forgot to thank also in the beginning there. And we've also been helped, and part of us here, with Holly Schneider, who's with CAMA. So we have had citizen input at this point for the work that we've done. But the tidal monitoring has been going on the coast here since the 1880s. So there's a lot of data on it. Once we get our measuring equipment in there to correlate with the tidal portion of it, it will take about 3 to 4 months worth of data collection to correspond to our scale. And one of the reasons that we're going to be recommending that we put our own water surface monitoring equipment in is that we have a couple of special conditions here that are not reflected in the 2 NOAA stations that are already extant, which is up in Wilmington at the downtown Wilmington at the harbor there, and out on Wrightsville Beach. We have a special condition with Snow's Cut, where fresh water is coming through Snow's Cut. That'll go on top of the salt water, so that gets us during peak flow conditions in the river. We've got an elevated water surface level. Secondly, we're directly related to the tide, even though we're in a cove situation because of the cut at Carolina Inlet. So we directly reflect the tide. And fourthly, as we all know, that when we do get a north wind, that wind can stack water up in the south end of the cove. So the objective here, in addition to measuring what our water surface level is given these special conditions, we need to have a framework that we can make a reasonable risk analysis for the elevations that we are finally end up with on the assessment of that. And that risk analysis will be analogous to a Q10, Q25, Q100 storm event. So that they're reflecting the risk that the town wants to or wishes to assume, and that'll be a combination of the safety factors plus the economic factors. What the town has done so far, the committee feels that the town has done a stellar job on planning for this so far. Those issues that are working in the field right now with local flooding is that we have about half of the intersections are already equipped with check valves. Those check valves have made a material difference on the amount of water and the elevation on the water that's coming up. The other thing the town is doing right now is they're dedicating $80,000 a year on specific maintenance for Canal Drive to clean the sand out, make sure there's pizza boxes aren't on the storm grates and items like that. One of the drivers on here in conjunction with that is the bulkhead project. This is for the intersections. That's one of the drivers behind the ordinance, so that we'll have a target elevation for the public improvements that we're going to do at each one of the intersections. The north end improvements are kind of the future that we were seeing for similar type of improvements on Canal Drive, and that would be a new storm drains, and a pump system to take the water out. So, task one, and these tasks here reflect the contract proposal that Apton has given us, so that we've got direct one-to-one correspondence on that. But task one is an elevation survey for the existing bulkheads. This will be lot specific, so that we know exactly what is gonna be required at any individual lot once we do, task three, which is a vulnerability study. Task three on the vulnerability study, excuse me for stepping by ahead here. This is not an assessment of how good or how serviceable the bulkheads are at this point. This vulnerability has to do with how it's going to work in conjunction with the neighboring bulkheads as far as the elevations go, and to keep the tidal water from coming in. Task two, that's our measuring equipment. That measuring equipment we'll have here. There'll be Adam's gonna give you details on this, but it's a rain gauge, a water surface monitoring, and an anemometer. So we'll have a complete NOAA level station when we bring it in. And then task four is the integration of the measuring equipment that we have right now in the elevation studies and the flood encroachment studies that we have with the current city database for the GIS.
Help me understand what ESRI, I think I know what it is, but tell me what ESRI is.
ESRI is a software program for graphic information systems.
Okay.
So
I just thought I'd ask because I know.
I thought you knew everything.
yeah,
I did know what it was, I just knew you didn't.
Thanks.
I'm not afraid to ask. I can ask for directions,
yeah, there we go.
I'm quite all right.
So and that's on a T&M basis too, because it'll bring in, and like I said, Adam's going to go over each one of these. So that's what we're asking for tonight, and the rationale behind it. In the future, this is what you're going to see coming from the committee. One is the bulkhead ordinance itself. The bulkhead ordinance at this particular point in time, we are in full draft status. It is in review at the staff level. We're ascertaining where we need to go with that with interagency review, and then we would like to come back and present the bulkhead ordinance as a standalone workshop item for town council consideration in a month or two, probably 2 months. Then the other item which is big on the resident side is the traffic control, and we're also looking to Steve for the water situation up on Carolina Beach Avenue North also. But the traffic circulation recommendations, and I'd like to say that we're really fortunate to have Gil Dubois as our staff representative, because there's direct interface. So if someone comes to the committee with a traffic concern, we can express it to the committee, and it goes right to the operational portion of the town for resolution of it. And with that in mind, because I know this is big from the two large rain events that we had 2 weeks ago, I would encourage folks to come to our meeting, which is going to be on September 16th at 6 o'clock, probably in the council chamber, or not the council chambers, but the committee room next door. But I would encourage you to come by and talk to us. We do have public comments at the end of the meeting, and we do incorporate that into our recommendations and into our
Hey, Dale,
studies.
16th, the September meeting, Sunday night? Is that what you meant to say?
It's Thursday, second
Thursday, the 13th.
13th, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, yes, 13th. Childhood friend's birthday, I should have remembered that.
I know we're all.
But I would encourage you to please come to that, and we've had several people come already on what we've done, and it's been very helpful. So we do try and incorporate that in. Then our last two items here, these are for down the road, but our situation here is not unique. We're kind of a microcosm of what Miami is facing, or what Venice is facing, and what the Netherlands are facing with tidal incursions. And there's only a couple of solutions for them that work. One is to infill everything and raise your ground above flood level. That's obviously something we can't do within a developed area. The second one is what is being implemented by the town. The north end improvements, which is essentially a pump system for freshwater evacuation when the storm drains in a situation they can't function with the tidal rise. So to get a good rational basis for that, you need to have a plan for that. So we're working on various elements of that, and we're going to bring that to town council in the future. But that is one of the things we're going to be making is master plan drainage recommendations, which would also bring in something like we saw there on the previous presentation there on Harper. And then the last item here that is very nascent, and we've just started to work on this, is how this will integrate in with the existing town subdivision ordinances, because there is going to be overlap between all of these items. So that's one of the things we'll be taking a hard look at. So with that in mind, our primary objective tonight is to get the initiating studies in operation, order out and install the equipment, and start the assessment process. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Adam, and he'll go over the technical elements of it here.
Thank you. Good evening, council. Thank you
Hey,
for taking the time to have us talk tonight. So as Dale mentioned, I'm going to go through just some of the technical aspects, but I wanted to kind of give you just a brief introduction of who Aptum is. I know it's hard to say. Aptum is a big company, but we are actually the group that I work for is a core group that used to be called Coastal Planning and Engineering. Over a couple years, we've been acquired by a couple different companies, and the name has changed. That core group hasn't changed, and that group includes engineers, geologists, biologists, oceanographers, environmental scientists. You name it, we take projects from cradle to grave, and this just kind of gives you a little background of the different things that we do into coastal marine engineering, the geosciences, which involves the surveying aspects on land and in the water, and also some of the natural resources, the environmental studies, the investigations, the environmental impact assessments. We do all that stuff in-house. So just want to kind of give you an idea of who we are. We're not civil engineers doing civil works projects. We're coastal scientists, coastal engineers, coastal biologists that deal with coastal issues. And also, just so you know, here in Wilmington, we've had an office for 10 plus years. So we're right down the road. I actually live here in Carolina Beach. I've been here for about 4 years. Our office in particular in North Carolina, we've dealt with over 19 different coastal communities, dealing with beach renourishment, contingency planning, as you can see here with New Hanover County, doing environmental impact assessments. We also do water quality monitoring for New Hanover County. So we do have a local presence, and we do work in this area. This kind of gives you the summary screen of what Dale kind of outlined in the beginning. These give the 3 tasks, just the bulkhead survey, the coordination that we would do, along with having the contractor that would provide and install the monitoring station. I'll go over the bulkhead vulnerability study and some points in there, and then also the task for the GIS support for the LiDAR, and then all the other information kind of put together. This is also another good screen. It's got a lot of good information on it. This is just a breakdown of the existing funding. The estimated costs here were provided in a proposal to the town a while back, and this gives you those ballpark numbers. We have submitted an updated proposal to Mr. Kramer. He has that information, but this just kind of gives you, so you can see what kind of dollar amount is associated with these tasks, and then the total estimated for the work.
Adam,
Yes, sir.
let me interject here, just so council's aware. During our budget discussions, this was one of the items that was added into the budget for stormwater, was the $65,000 for overall study for this project. So it's already something that is built into the budget. This isn't something that's an additional ask.
Could you explain, we've got a, if I'm correct, Jeremy, that they installed a tide monitoring at the marina, but this probably is gonna be a higher level. Is it, cause I think the other's just a yard sticking out.
Yeah, this one would be a lot more sophisticated than,
I figured for that price.
It is more sophisticated. The gauges that are out there now are tide gauges.
Right.
And they are physically monitored. So a person goes out and takes a photograph of it, and that's how it comes through. This, and again, Adam's gonna go through with it, this
Would be located in the same place?
it may be. Sighting them right now, we're thinking about doing it out at Oyster.
Yes.
Where that particular, or one of the new king tide
Yeah, king
gauges
tide,
is
right.
located.
Exactly.
We're thinking of the same thing. They do need to be protected. They need to be located in a place where they're not susceptible to wake tide coming through and that kind of stuff. But yes, this is a more sophisticated, real-time monitoring, and it includes the rain, because we're going to have to correlate the rain with the tide to some degree. It obviously won't be on time, but we need to correlate.
So it'll electronically transfer this information
That's correct.
somewhere.
That is correct.
That's what I
And the monitoring, going to be pretty easy to monitor.
Okay, well, that was just something I wanted to ask, but go ahead, thanks.
No problem at all.
Question for you, Adam.
Yes.
On task number 2, it says does not include anemometer. What's the rough cost on that?
So the anemometer, just to kind of give you a background, this system is based on what the state uses for their water level monitoring stations. I spoke with David Furlong with the North Carolina Department of Emergency Management, and this system will be essentially what the state uses. So in the early discussions, the station only included the tide gauge or the water level sensor and the rain bucket, the rain gauge. And at the meeting last week, we had talked about adding an anemometer. The anemometer is you can actually get what they call a multi-parameter sensor. This includes the anemometer, but it can also include a barometer, temp gauge. So it ranges from $1,000 to $3,000 depending on the suite of sensors that
Okay.
that come with it.
And much of the reason for the anemometer is just to substantiate what we already know to be true, and that is to correlate the northeast winds with the highest water. So that's what's going to come out in the study. And we discussed that 2 weeks ago. That's rather inevitable.
You're correct.
Ooh, Weatherman Joe.
Yeah, I've got some more slides that kind of go into a little bit more detail about the system.
We use that.
So, just to kind of go into a little bit more about the bulkhead survey, it is what it is. It's actually a physical survey of each of the segments of the bulkheads along Canal Drive. You can see here, starting where the winter boats are, and going north all the way down Florida Avenue. I forget what the street there that we cut it off, but
Delaware.
Delaware. We'll be able to get top of bulkhead elevations along each segment at every property along here. There was some discussion about whether doing it by land or doing it by boat because of people's properties. We do have a flat bottom aluminum skip that we go up high tide and try to get everything we can by boat, so we don't have to interfere get everybody's property. But however we do it, we'll be able to go through and get top of bulkhead elevations. We'll also survey the rim elevations on the stormwater outfalls and the drainage basins or catch basins, so we get actual hard data on all those features to know where they are located. And we'll be using RTK GPS and to be relative to the NAVD88, which is the standard datum for surveys. But then that can be translated to any other datum, as Dale mentioned, the mean sea level that the elevation is right now for the bulkhead. We can
What's RTK R2D.
RTK is a fancy word for a GPS receiver
Okay.
that's used to survey. It's a real-time kinematic surveying. So set up a base station and then you can go collect points with the push of a button. That it tells you exactly what that elevation is relative to the area. The second point on there is what you can do now. We use drones to capture photos and videos of an area, and then through a process called photogrammetry, you can take those photos and turn it into a digital surface map. So the drone will fly over the area, take lots and lots of photos, but then be able to create a 3D model of the area that could be imported into GIS, and you can look at it to be able to give you a big picture, so to speak, of the area. You could be able to look and see what's going on, and then also we'd have the elevation from the survey to kind of tie everything together. And that 3D model will come back into Task 4 and use for GIS analysis. The last item there is basically we'll have an engineer, actually probably be me, out there when we're doing the survey, taking pictures and looking at each of the bulkhead segments, and just provide a report of each of the segments of what type of bulkheads there, get some photos, and then just the general description of what's going around it. Are there outfalls near it? Is there any visible signs of damage? It's not going to be a recommendation, to do anything, but it'll just provide a town with an observation, so they can go along at each of the properties and see what's out there and what was out there at the time of the survey. Task 2, this is the information regarding the monitoring station. As I mentioned before, this is very similar, if not identical, to what the state uses. I think there are 540 locations throughout the state where they monitor water levels. There is the one at Johnny Mercer Pier, which is, I believe, a similar system. They're putting a few more over near Oak Island and Ocean Isle Beach currently. As you can see, it kind of gives you some information. What it is, it's a radar water level sensor. There's essentially two types of water level sensors. The pressure sensor, what actually goes in the water, and when the change of the height of water above the pressure sensor, it gives you an idea of what that water level is. This one is out of the water, so you don't have to worry about fouling, getting any growth on it, or maintenance. The maintenance is less, but it's highly accurate, and if it can be located in an area, it can provide really good data. So what this would do, this box here, this will house the power supply and also the cellular modem. All the information will be sent via the cellular modem and the antenna to a cloud-based service that's run by the state called Contrail. That is basically the state's depository for all this data, and the town would have access to Contrail to be able to look at the data and basically record and save that data over the long term. The contractor that's spoken to is the contractor that works for the state, and they would provide and install all the equipment. The only thing missing here is shown is the anemometer. I'll talk more about the interface. Again, as Dale mentioned earlier, is finding a suitable location for this at Oyster Shell. Now, I believe there's a lift station there, or a pump station. Excuse me. That with a little bit of modification might be a really good location for this. That location is centrally located. What we're thinking of and making sure that we're not going to bias the readings one way or the other. If you put them too close to the south end and you get a hard wind, you're going to get higher water levels than you would have at the north end. So trying to find some place where you're capturing just a kind of an even water level within the basin, so you know what's going on in there. And then just so we know, the town would be responsible for any and all landowner approvals or permits for the installation. That's why we're kind of thinking if it's a town property and town site, then would make it a lot easier. This right here shows you an example of what the data would look like once it's transmitted to Contrail. The state takes the information from Contrail and then sends the information to this flood inundation and mapping alert network, the Feynman site. All this would be done for free. This is a service that the state does, but they have a water level monitoring station. They also send the data to the National Weather Service. There's another page that's very similar to this that would show that data over time as it's changing within the basin, what it would look like. It also gives you some indications of different levels, which would be determined through task 3, the vulnerability study, but it kind of shows you where the water level is in relation to the study. There is also an additional item in the proposal to have a dedicated web page for the data. Now, the public, anybody is able to get this data from the Feynman site. You can go there, you can go to Johnny Mercer Pier, you can go in, and the town could have a link to that site where anyone from the town could go and look at it. But the dedicated web page, which are these two on the bottom, that it could be generated, it would show that you could have that graphic on a town web page somewhere so that people could go to it and look at it. But there's also the added functionality that the system can actually send out emails or text notifications when a certain water level is reached or exceeded. I'm just thinking that that information could be sent to town personnel if there's a storm event coming. All right, the water level in the basin is up to a foot above some threshold level, so you kind of know what's going on. So that's kind of something additional that can be added into this one.
Adam, you ought to be able to link real-time info, the weather data coming out of the station, right onto some place on the town website.
Yes, yes,
And there's multiple different ways to use that information. Like Adam was saying, we could use it for sort of real-time operations, where right now we guess at when the high tide's going to be, and we send a staff person out to canal an hour before, and they get to stay there until an hour after the event. We'd have better information to be able to project that, which naturally reduces our costs. But it would also be information that we could use in the EOC if we have emergency response issues.
and you can also start correlating some of the issues that you're having with certain events. And I know we're talking a lot about the water levels in the basin, but initially when we were talking about this, when I first got involved, I came to a meeting back in February where the council was talking about the flooding on Canal Drive. Is you basically had two issues. You had the rain-affected flooding, but you also had the tidal-induced flooding. So you also have these rain gauges as well that would tell you, and then you'd be able to correlate some of those rain events, like, okay, we had a rain event, but we had a low tide. What were the impacts? You'll be able to start putting some of those pieces of the puzzle together and seeing, okay, when we have these events, we're going to know where the flooding is occurring. But this just kind of gives you an idea of what the data would look like, what you'd be able to see when you went to the site and could see that stuff real time. And this is another task that, as Dale mentioned, is called the Bulkhead Vulnerability Study, but it's not actually talking about the bulkheads. It's looking at the water levels and how the bulkhead would be vulnerable to different, as he made mention of, return intervals, a 5-year storm, a 25-year storm, a 50-year storm, a 100-year storm. So what we do under this task is perform we call it an extremal analysis, basically looking at the water level data, looking at the high water events, and then from that scaling out and coming up with these return intervals. So we look at the water level data, we look at climate data and sea level rise modeling data that NOAA and the Army Corps already have out, and pull all this information in together, and from that, give that information to the committee, to the town, to use in making their determination of what the minimum bulkhead height or elevation should be. So this is providing additional data to make that judgment. It'll provide that number, but then the town will take into account other factors than just what this study will be. But there'll be a report. We actually have this is LIDAR data back from 2015. We'll be able to incorporate that. But it's basically just taking in all the historical data, looking at it and seeing how that water level has changed over the years to basically provide provide the backup to this bulkhead height. You don't want to have a height and elevation that's, not say arbitrary, but this will provide an engineering analysis and engineering backup, hard data to why that elevation is where it is. And so if somebody questions, you can say, well, it's based on this, and then you can go from there. We've recently done, Aptum has recently done one of these studies for the city of Delray. And this just kind of shows you an example of the historic record for the water levels and the sea level rise that they're dealing with down south there. And as you can see, some of these pictures almost look like Canal Drive in Carolina Beach. Their study was on a lot larger scale. I think they had something like 2,000 miles of canals that they were looking at and incorporating, but scaling that down to Carolina Beach and Canal Drive, it's the same process, looking at information just geared towards this area. But this is something that we've done, and we're looking to do for Carolina Beach. And just to kind of give you an idea of the existing data that's out there, there's been a lot of talk about surveys. This is a LiDAR survey of the area. Recently, I think it was after Hurricane Matthew in 2015, but it just shows you the detail that's already out there that we can incorporate into the study that we're doing. And it goes directly into Task 4, but you can see that vertical accuracy. Obviously, you have homes there, you have some missing data, and being able to get that survey data from the bulkheads along the canal will be great data to have. But just to kind of look and see what the area is already like, and see kind of where the drainage is already occurring, the sinks, the low points, you can see they're already pinpointed on there, and be able to look at that information in a lot greater detail. So that information will be able to brought in. This Task 4 will be working with the town to basically identify those problem areas. This task involves conducting what we call a surface flow drainage analysis. It's a hydrologic analysis that basically shows where the water is flowing. So say if you had say we have a rainfall event, and where does that rainfall go within the limits of Canal Drive and that section? And it will be used to identify high-risk areas. Obviously, you can see from the last slide, at each intersection you have low points, and maybe even be able to identify some additional areas that could be used, or they could be turned into outfalls. Another place that could be used to get water out of the road or out of the area faster. But this will basically be taking the information that is readily available, running the ESRI, the ESRI analysis, the hydraulic analysis, and then using the drone data and the elevation data, and pulling it all together and then basically giving it to the town. Will have a tool to basically analyze what's going on. The operations can look at it, maybe help fine-tune some of the information, and say if they want to look at, they know about some area that's going on over here, to be able to go to that area and then kind of address it and look at it. But then this would all basically, again, go through the town's GIS.
They would end up training Gigi on how to go and utilize the tools that are in ESRI that she uses now for our GIS, be able to use this model, and we can do it basically on our own once we have the system identified and set up.
And this is just one thing. This was something that Mr. Kramer provided to us. It's just kind of a screenshot of the first page, but I won't go into detail on it, but a lot of the information that we would collect and that we would provide to the town as a deliverable could be valuable information that could be used for grant programs such as this, that the town could incorporate into the information needed that FEMA would be directly looking for. This study would be providing some of that background information, so that the town, if they move forward with some additional work, they could be getting some funding from FEMA and would have this information already available. I just kind of wanted to bring that up. A lot of the things that we're talking about doing are things that directly relate to some of these grant programs for FEMA.
this is a change from the existing grant programs that Jeremy manages, or a type of grant that Jeremy manages now, where we're elevating houses. The FEMA has changed their granting structure to make it so that not only are we able to raise houses with the funds, but we can also put that towards infrastructure improvements for those type of aspects. So, for instance, if we determine through this study we need to put bulkheads at the end of every street, and that would be a qualifying grant eligible type item that we could put in for.
Which I believe the mayor and I met with Chance Lambreth and members of the committee to talk to him to make sure Jeremy's plugged in on this, so that we could start working other than just do the houses, look at a larger grant. And,
Right.
and I think we talked about having to be sponsored by one application at the state or a mitigating agency.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
I'd like to also suggest that the studies that we're likely to recommend are also eligible for that same grant program.
That would make great sense if we could try and do that.
All right, just a few more slides here. I think just kind of going back to summary slides to kind of show you, what I've gone through, and just to kind of you can see where we're at. Again, the 4 tasks, as I mentioned, the elevation survey, the purchase and installation of the monitoring station with the water level sensor, rain gauge, and anemometer, the vulnerability study to assist in determining the minimum bulkhead elevation, and then also the time and materials task for performing the hydrologic analysis, and then working with town staff to have that system incorporated and to be able to work with that in the future. And then again, the same slide, these 2 slides you've seen, the existing funding kind of gives you just a background again on what those estimated costs are. That's it. Thank you.
Anybody have questions? Dale and Adam, we have talked about the specificity required to go into, it's the pre-disaster mitigation grant, Michael, isn't it? And there's 2 criteria, infrastructure, 1 at or below 4.5 million, and at and above. That'd be useful when we do select or recommend a sized bulkhead. There'll be a price associated with that would then go into the grant that the grant writer would submit. I don't think will the survey be finished soon? It wasn't at the last meeting.
The canal survey, we got an update today that Bob Jones should be getting us a partial survey by the end of the week, and then they'll be finishing the rest of it. That's the latest information I had from today.
Okay. Then we've already talked about the ordinance and getting the town attorney to do a sanity scrub before taking it outside of the municipal. That's all I have. Appreciate you guys. That was very good.
Thank you.
They're
Thank
doing
you, Dale and
doing a
Adam.
great work for those that live in Canal and anywhere near, putting together some outstanding products. Thank you, Dale and team.
Council, given the fact that I'm not hearing any concerns about moving forward with the program that they're talking about, all the signature and authority and everything for the contract is something that I can routinely handle.
Right, and it's in the budget, and it's below the
It's in the
65
budget. It's
budget.
below the budgeted amount, and so if you don't mind, we're going to move forward with the project and keep collecting the
No
information.
objections, I
Rock
think
and roll.
that's what you gotta do.
Okay. With no other comments, I would like to make a motion to go into closed session to discuss an attorney-client, real estate, and personnel matter in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 143.318-11A, 3, 5, and 6. Regarding the attorney-client, the case being discussed is New Hanover County Superior Court, 18 CVS 2957. Lee Michelle Rock et al. Versus Town of Carolina Beach et al. Reference the real estate matter. The parcels being discussed include Romeo 08500 006 009 000, owned by Freeman Beach LLC. Parcel Romeo 08500 006 008 0888, owned by B&F Enterprises of Calabash LLC. Romeo 08500 006 007 001, Romeo 08550 006 007 000, Romeo 08500 006 006 000, owned by Carolina Freeman LLC. Romeo 08500 006 003 000, owned by DRDK LLC. Romeo 08500 006 002 000, owned by the Winnie Everett Fuchs heirs, for the purpose of engaging in acquiring, constructing, reconstructing, extending, or otherwise building or improving beach erosion control or flood and hurricane protection works and park space. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So what's that last number?
Can you repeat those two lines before that one?
One of you guys can do it and make the damn motion. Darn motion.
If I ever have to call out those numbers, I'm always gonna say Romeo, just like you did.
Romeo.
Hallelujah. The mayor.
No, thank you for everything you do. I hope you have a blast.
When are you leaving?
Enjoy half right.
Just remember you're 3 hours behind us.
I didn't go anywhere with Leanne either.
I would go.
Give me 5 minutes and I will call you. I hate it when somebody asks me how to get a refund. I'm trying to call them, fuck that. I said I need to use that.
All right. I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 18-1091 to amend chapter 14-21 of the town code to eliminate section D1, requiring a food truck operation to maintain an eating and drinking establishment prior to the issuance of an annual permit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. One last, I make a motion that town staff bring back the food truck ordinance for future consideration to include public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Make a motion to